Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Friday, everybody. Just a piece of housekeeping at the beginning of today's episode. I will be flying to New Zealand this coming Monday. So this Monday, there may not be an episode. There will be an episode tomorrow on Saturday, and there will definitely be an episode on Tuesday. Let's begin. With the backdrop of the Israel-Gaza conflict and the US backing of the former, Beijing is using the opportunity to push for greater alignment with Arab states in the Middle East and North Africa. As Beijing has communicated to the several Arab national leaders visiting this week, China supports an immediate ceasefire and recognition of a Palestinian state. That alignment with Arab states is helping Beijing to extend its political sway in countries that until recently saw China chiefly as an economic partner, and win new allies in its global contest for influence with the United States. Yesterday, Thursday, saw the first day of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, which was kicked off with a speech from the General Secretary himself. In his speech, Xi proposed 5 cooperation frameworks to set up the building of a China-Arab community with a shared future. Let's quote some of the speech directly. The first is a more dynamic framework for innovation. China will build with the Arab side 10 joint laboratories in such areas as life and health, AI, green and low-carbon development, modern agriculture, and space and information technology. We will enhance cooperation on AI to make it empower the real economy and to promote a broad-based global governance system on AI. As an aside, we note that AI cooperation with players like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates may be difficult due to their AI collaboration with the United States. They may have to pick a side. We continue with Xi's speech. The second is an expanded framework for investment and finance cooperation. The third is a more multifaceted framework for energy cooperation. China will enhance strategic cooperation with the Arab side on oil and gas and integrate supply security with market security. The fourth is a more balanced framework for mutually beneficial economic and trade ties. The fifth is a broader framework for people-to-people exchanges. Here ends the direct quote from the speech. As regular viewers know, China has pushed to build an alternative world order to challenge the United States, embracing Russia and emerging economies in the so-called global south. Its alignment with Arab states is part of this strategy. Beijing has cast itself as the leader of the BRICS bloc, which it has worked to expand. Iran, the UAE, Ethiopia, and Egypt all accepted invitations to join this year. Okay, this is the first development, but before we move on to the next story, we note that it will be interesting to follow in the coming days just how Beijing reacts to the Trump conviction news in North America. One of the best initial takes was made by China analyst Bill Bishop. He expressed today, quote, "I think the Trump conviction may be tricky for propaganda work domestically, but useful internationally. On the one hand, it highlights a rotting and fracturing American democracy. On the other hand, it highlights that a former top leader can be arrested, put on trial, judged by a jury of his peers and convicted for relatively small acts of corruption, which, especially just 5 days before the 35th anniversary of June 4th, here he's referring to the Tiananmen massacre, may be a topic policymakers do not want to be the subject of much discussion." End quote. Next up, we move to the Chinese currency. One of the big debates in Chinese finance in recent months has been whether devaluation of the yuan is coming. Market pressure is growing on the People's Bank of China to allow the renminbi to weaken, as traders bet that a yawning gap with US borrowing costs will lead more investors to sell out of the Chinese currency. This week, the deputy governor of the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, Tao Ling, gave interviews discussing the currency. One question asked in the interview was, quote, "General Secretary Xi Jinping emphasized promoting high-quality financial development and accelerating the construction of a strong financial nation. The key core financial elements of a strong financial nation include having a strong currency and a strong central bank. How should this be understood and implemented?" End quote. Tao's response is noteworthy. Quote, "We understand that a strong currency should have the characteristics of stability and usability. Stability includes both internal value stability and maintaining a basically stable exchange rate at a reasonable and balanced level externally. Usability means being convenient, efficient, and safe to use. Effectively functioning as a unit of account, medium of exchange and store of value, and being widely used internationally as a payment currency, investment and financing currency, and reserve currency." End quote. As UK-based The Financial Times explains this week, the People's Bank of China's reluctance to let the yuan weaken against the dollar is a clear deviation from its previous policy, under which it had tracked a basket of currencies that has left the central bank uncomfortably exposed. One currency trader at a state bank in Beijing told the outlet that monetary authorities were weighing how to release pent-up market pressures on the yuan, for instance by allowing a gradual weakening of fixings. Despite market pressures to devalue, there are strong political incentives to resist. Quote, "The negative RMB carry versus USD and other currencies combined with very limited RMB upside makes it rational for anyone who can short the RMB to do so. This of course puts substantial downward pressure on the RMB, but the People's Bank of China is very reluctant to see the RMB depreciate. They are reluctant partly for reasons of international prestige, with Xi Jinping calling earlier this year for a strong RMB policy. But the main reason is because a weaker RMB worsens the demand imbalance in China by shifting resources from household consumers to manufacturing exporters. This would make China all the more vulnerable to trade conflict, and of course trade conflict would only get worse and much angrier if the People's Bank of China were to depreciate by a meaningful amount a currency that is already fundamentally undervalued. China's massive trade surpluses are already more than the world can absorb. But if the People's Bank of China continues trying to support the RMB, the chances are that short positions will continue to build as investors who are short are being paid a positive carry while waiting for depreciation. In the end, the People's Bank of China is damned if they do and damned if they don't, mainly because the fundamental problem isn't monetary but structural. And until it is resolved, the People's Bank of China can just play along the edges." End quote. Next up, the Chinese economy. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, liking, sharing, and subscribing are all big helps. It's just a few clicks of the mouse, but it's the only way in which the channel can grow. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. Yesterday, Thursday, the Ministry of Commerce, the General Administration of Customs, and the Equipment Development Department of the Central Military Commission issued an announcement on implementing export controls on a list of items. Under the new policy, the controlled export products involve equipment and software in key industries, including aerospace, structural components, and engineering and engine manufacturing, gas turbine engine manufacturing, aerospace surface window-related equipment, and ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene fiber-related items. A Ministry of Commerce spokesperson said that it is an international practice to control exports of such items. Quote, "China is following this international practice and implementing export controls on relevant materials and items based on China's national security needs, which is reasonable and lawful." End quote. Lu Xiang, a senior researcher with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, who specializes in U.S. studies, told state media yesterday, quote, "Since this export control order was formulated and issued with the participation of the Central Military Commission, it means that the relevant control measures are for military items or dual-use items." End quote. In recent years, Beijing has strongly condemned U.S. export restrictions on materials related to national security. The controls will kick in on the 1st of July. According to data from China's customs agency, in the first 4 months of this year, the country exported roughly $7.2 billion of products listed under the new controls, including about $1 billion to the US. Exporters wishing to ship such products overseas will now need to apply for an export permit. Next up, and finally for today. Today, Friday, saw the publication of China's official Purchasing Managers' Index, PMI. And according to the numbers, China's manufacturing activity unexpectedly fell in May as a protracted property crisis continues to weigh on businesses, consumers, and investors. The PMI fell to 49.5 in May from 50.4 in April, below the 50 mark, separating growth from contraction. Zhang Zhiwei, president and chief economist at Pinpoint Asset Management, expressed on the news, quote, "The manufacturing PMI dropped below 50. China cannot depend only on exports to drive its economy. The fiscal policy needs to become more proactive and boost domestic demand. So far this year, the fiscal policy has been muted, with bond issuance behind schedule. The change in policy stance in the property sector is one step in the right direction, but its impact on the economy is likely to be gradual." End quote. Larry Hu, chief China economist at Macquarie Capital, expressed, quote, "The contribution of property policy to the recent PMI expansion is limited due to the modest scale of the policy. Currently, the bright spot in China's economy remains the exports. Activity in China's industrial sector this year will largely depend on how long demand in overseas economies can be sustained, particularly economic growth in the US market." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.